Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Baylor, Director of Communications at NUCA. Welcome to our latest Webinar Wednesday, sponsored by NUCA National Partner Tenna. First, before we begin, some webinar housekeeping for attendees. Today's webinar will be recorded. It will be available on NUCA's YouTube channel that can be accessed via the front page of NUCA.com. All participants are muted upon entry. Phone participants can use *6 to mute and unmute themselves. Questions will be asked at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, you can submit a written question at any time using the chat feature, and I will read them at the conclusion of our discussion. Now let's get started. A key component of proper construction equipment management and overall business success involves the safe operation of your construction assets and protection of your people. But the rise of AI has enabled businesses across industries to overcome some of their toughest hurdles. And for construction, addressing job site and on-road safety has become a prime and trending application. Today's fascinating webinar will be led by Russ Young, Tenna's Chief Business Development Officer. Russ will discuss construction-focused AI technologies that address safety issues, reduce risk, and leave construction businesses with no excuse but to adopt. Our webinar will have a particular focus on the latest in AI safety cameras used to detect common distracted driving behavior and that alerts drivers in real time. Russ, welcome back to NUCA's Webinar Wednesday. I turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks. A great intro, and you can see my screen right now with the picture of me from about 10 years ago.
It is terrific, and you're still handsome.
Thank you. And since we don't have a huge crew today, if they do submit a question and it's really timely to what we're talking about, feel free to interject. Just quickly what we're going to talk about. So yeah, I'm Russ Young with Tenna. We're a construction equipment management platform. Been around for about 8 years now. Partnered with NUCA for most of that. Big NUCA fans. And in fact, I am in Lincoln, Nebraska today, down the road from NUCA's Nebraska headquarters. Today, we're going to talk about safety, which I know is near and dear to NUCA's heart, and one of the reasons we're thrilled to partner with NUCA. And we're going to talk specifically about some of the advancements in telematics that have led to some great results with safety. So we're going to talk about how that plays and what role that plays in all of equipment operations. We're going to talk about some of the real data that's coming out to address the safety, so you have that. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the insurance providers, not just the carriers, the brokers, some of the captives. They're all getting deeply involved in this as well, and they can be a great resource for you. Yes, NUCA, yes, Tenna, yes, a lot of the equipment folks, but they can give you kind of that neutral play. And they're, I guess what I like about them is they're so awesome at putting together tons of data. And then we're going to talk about vertical integration, that we're seeing a lot of benefit from these systems when you don't throw 20 different pieces of technology at your employees when you got 1 or 2 or 3 they need to learn to get their job done, and how what effect that has on safety, in fact. But that's kind of the topics of today. We're going to jump right into some of the things we're seeing. And as a kickoff, I talk about, yes, we're going to talk about safety, which is we view as the most important part of risk, because you're talking about the human element there. But what's exciting about this is you don't have to, construction is lucky that there are now unified systems. So you can think about, yes, worker safety being a huge one, but also as you look at the risk to projects around maintenance and utilization, location, theft, all these things. Finally, I'd say the collection of objective data, not people giving their opinion, but true objective data on where things are, where they're running, what maintenance they need, have they left the project when they weren't supposed to, kind of thing, as well as, we're definitely going to be focusing on the worker safety component of this, but we're also going to tie in all risks around all construction projects. So kind of thinking about that, we see a lot of folks at construction companies thinking about all of their risk, and all of these tying in together. So when you think about the ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure is why a lot of folks are doing this, but even post-incident data is very getting a bigger play now. Equipment performance, so the risk around overbuying or over renting equipment, or managing that equipment better from a financial perspective to around capital expense and operational expense. But so all of these are tying into single-use platforms, sort of like an iPhone, instead of having to buy all the different pieces. But let's dive in specifically into telematics and addressing safety, risk, and management. So let's talk about some of the latest trends we're seeing here. And some of these you'll know, hopefully some of them will be new. Safety cameras, unless you've been under a rock, you've probably noticed there are more safety cameras, not less. It is one of the hottest items out there in technology across industries, so including logistics, delivery companies, manufacturing, basically anybody that has anything driving around on the road. And we're seeing lots of AI coming in there. But that AI can both be road facing and internally facing. The internally facing is a fast growing segment and comes with many, many questions. So we'll dive into those a little bit today. And then there's way more accessories available today. So some of you that might have been in some of the newer cars might have seen the 360 cameras. So those are available now, as well as not just for on-road, but also for heavy equipment. So if you think about NUCA contractors and all the stuff they have to deal with, there are now cameras available for basically everything. So heavy equipment safety cameras, and then 360 stuff as well. And these cameras, along with telematics, are giving us greatly improved driver scorecards. And driver scorecards have been around for a while, but a few cool new things that I think is very valuable to be aware of is the coaching and how you can coach your teams with true data and true accountability is better than it used to be. The ability with and what I love about NUCA is you have all these different roles for people, and you're able to look at these driver scorecard, make them role specific. There's great ways to incentivize and engage drivers to improve that. And early detection, so you can be more coaching, ounce of prevention versus a pound of a cure. And these driver scorecards are really getting better all the time. So if you're unfamiliar with those driver scorecards, great thing to look into. Diving a little deeper into this, wanted to talk specifically about these new AI technologies, because they are artificial intelligence, as you all know, is a big hot topic right now. I get asked to talk about it a lot. A couple early use cases here, and we'll drive through some of those things you can use them for. So what has been around for a little while now is the road facing AI. So this is the camera facing out. Again, there's 360 available on cameras now, but this road facing AI, some of you might have cars with this, but forward collision warning alerts. So the driver, it will warn you on collisions. It will give you instant feedback on maintaining safe distance from the fall. So, the driver scorecard is more of a, let's look at, how you've done over the month and see how you're doing. And are you improving kind of a score? The road facing AI gives instant feedback. So if somebody is you're tailgating or being tailgated, it gives the road facing AI can do that. This stuff is getting better and better all the time, as well as, if I may say, cheaper and cheaper. And then I'd also add driver-facing AI. Now, this is, and folks might have questions around this. I would start with there's more of this, not less of this. It's coming. Some companies are looking to not do it because it feels a little bit big brothery. Sorry, did you have a question? No, okay. But let's talk about some of the great things that are coming out of this. So distracted driving, and that can be if someone's not paying attention to the road, and some specific ones, if someone's getting drowsy and yawning, it will give alert. Phone use is a big one, right? We've probably all now been on the road now and seen drivers looking at their phone, and maybe most of us have been guilty of it ourselves, in fact. But now it'll give instant feedback when you're looking at your phone, reminding you to pay attention. There's smoking detection available. Seatbelt detection is one of the newest ones. and then it'll warn about obstructions. I would pause here that we hear a lot of folks worrying about the big brother aspect of this. And we can dive into some of the use cases here. But the good news is these are becoming more and more used and more accepted. I would even say there's not to be an ageist here, but I'm 57, by the way, and I probably would have initially found it weird to have this in mine as well. But my son in his 20s put one in his car on his own because he wanted it. So there is sort of an age a trend to this as well, and some interesting data around that. But those are I wanted to make sure to cover these, and if you have questions, feel free to pop them in now, or we can also take them at the end. This is one of the fastest moving areas, and the data behind it truly saving lives and saving a lot of money in construction firms is adding up pretty quickly. So let's talk about some of the what have been around for a little while, but have gotten better and easier to use. And again, now all on one platform. So we're seeing a big uptick in compliance. One is DVIR. So these are vehicle inspections, right? And so the great news here, vehicle inspections have been around for a while. They're being more required. And there's both a carrot and a stick happening now. So most of the DOT are starting to require these to be in digital format. So folks are sort of being pushed into modernizing their DVIR. The good news is the results are great around this. So for a number of reasons, the digital ones are now available in the palm of your hand, right? So on Tenna, for instance, you can just bring it up and do it here. So it's faster, easier. You also can't pencil whip it. The old vehicle inspections where you might walk around your low boy to make sure the dozer was tied down correctly. And you might be able to just hop in the cab and pencil whip that. Now you can no longer do that. So these things are provable, they're digital, and the records go in with the equipment with the operator. And so a lot of these things are being caught more effectively. So yes, great news is permanent site awareness and compliance with the federal and the Department of Transportation regulations. So it's one of those you kind of have to do it, but the results are compelling as well. We're seeing a big reduction, operating costs, breakdowns, malfunctions, all that as well. So DVR, although a little bit, sometimes I call DVR a compliance thing because it's a maybe safety's boring cousin, if you will. But the results are real, and they're getting easier to do. ELD, so for another sort of compliance, but also for safety for long distance. Some of you may have this, some of you may not have this as a need, so I won't spend a lot of time here. But again, they're being baked into one platform. Compliance on this is being forced, and we're definitely, the data's in, the insurance companies monitor this. It is definitely reducing risk in human error. It's one of those boring compliance things, but if you are doing long distance stuff, it is a real issue, and it's now getting easier to do and all baked into one platform. And then finally, the IFTA stuff. This truly is, the more boring of the compliance stuff, but absolutely, the risk reduction here is on misreporting and non-compliance, which actually can be expensive and time-consuming. So, if any of you on here that are having to deal with IFTA, it is kind of a pain, and these things are getting absolutely easier, and the data is getting easier to collect and digital as well. And all of these risk reduction and compliance things baked into one platform, making it much easier.
There's a question from Steve.
Yeah.
The question is, on the driver-facing cameras, I understand the legislation on this varies greatly by state. So some companies that have fleets that would often cross state lines have issues. For example, in the St. Louis area, the Missouri rules and the Illinois rules are very different. Any sense if state federal rules will enable more driver-facing cameras or prohibit them?
Well, the short answer is the regulations are pushing for more of them, not less. It's happening more quickly and more slowly. Some of the leading places are like California and Massachusetts. There's also places where They're not allowing it in some of the, I would say that the tick is changing around the unions as well. Most unions pushed against these. Now we're starting to see some of the unions do a 180 and push for them. Now it's all about where you are and who you're working with. And then I would also say the bigger issue with inward facing cameras is more cultural than regulations, right? So for regulations, the insurance companies, in order to like renew your insurance or keep it from going up, they might want you to have inward facing cameras as an example, right? But where the real issue we see is the bigger hurdle folks have to get on is the cultural acceptance of these. If you've got a bunch of drivers that are in their 60s, they tend to not be excited about this. So how do you get them excited? And we do have some use cases for that as well. Not exactly what you asked, but what we're finding is, construction companies that are doing business in multiple states are typically, instead of, I guess I'd say this, the trend is they're, whatever the most difficult state they work in, they tend to meet that bar instead of like doing it separately. And the data point I'm seeing is that the insurance players are the biggest pushers for this technology, mostly because, they're, you look at some of the states, like in Florida, several of the insurance carriers are underwater. They're paying out more than they're collecting because of accidents. And so this type of technology, they're pushing up big time. Hopefully that answered that. If I missed part of that, please, tell them to stick it in there and we'll attack it again. So I wanted to give you a little bit of data here on some of the performance issues around some of these new ones. So here is a real life case study of a New Jersey contractor that is a NUCA member. And they rolled it out and did driver scorecard. So the driver scorecard at the beginning of the program were 46 out of 100. So this includes all the things inside of a driver scorecard measured over time, things like hard braking, hard accelerating, speeding, right? And all these are coming into the driver scorecard and then ranking, and then they review together. Now, the good news is 3 months later, just by reporting on it and people realizing it and getting some coaching, the scores went up to 102. So the reason I wanted to share this, and sometimes I get the question, why 102? You are able to get bonus points, by the way, in the scorecard. And I think what is pretty fascinating is that even after the rollout and people got better, it became consistent over time as well. So the minimum score every month since that program rollout has been 100 at the minimum. So this is a pretty successful rollout and a company that did it very well in terms of education. I would add also, my familiarity with this contractor is that they were also very good about carrot and coaching instead of stick. Obviously, if people are, speeding every day 6 months straight, then yeah, you might want to consider corrective action to be sure. And I don't mean to ignore that, but most folks actually kind of want to get better at this, is what we're learning. And if you use the correct coaching methodology instead of abusing them, just say, you just want them to go home, safe at the end of the day. And actually use some incentives and, gift cards, things like that. We see really good results with this stuff. Sort of continuing on, this is more around theft. There was this was a contractor in Florida, had an excavator stolen. And what I love about this story is that before they even needed it later that day, they had already found it and recovered it and brought it back to the job site. So just in terms of dollars on that, there was the $50K deductible. So, kind of getting that done and not having to meet that deductible, just as, dollars right down, right out of the gate, but also things like project delays. And if it was gone, what were you going to do? Did you have to rent and all these things. So you think about all the, there's a lot of costs that add up on top of that. And the other thing we love about this is that because it had, a Tenna location device on it, they found it and they found 3 of their missing vehicles recovered along with the excavator. It ends up that some of these are a little bit organized and storing these things for sale later on, I guess what is sort of a black market. Some of them are even leaving the country, you've probably heard. But the good news is, what is awesome about this is that it was stolen and back on site the same day. So these are some of the real pluses that people are seeing. So just some of the high level numbers that we're collecting, so that we can see where we are. The folks that get a distraction score were 25% less distracted in the future than those that didn't. So the numbers are pretty compelling. That makes a pretty big difference. The gap of time distracted, highly engaged telematics, unengaged users, you get 73% after just 1 month, which is, again, a pretty big number. Reduction in speeding during these programs, 38% reduction. And these, by the way, these are not Tenna numbers. These are collected industry numbers. And the made significant safety-related changes in the way they do it. This is 45% self-reported. So these are folks that were like appreciative of this and glad that they had gotten better. So these are, and the numbers over time are getting better in terms of both acceptance and driver behavior, et cetera. This is 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗀𝗃𝗃 construction, a Tenna customer, and this is where you can see their driver. I'm actually going to go back and see that again. So you'll see this is the truck is here in the left turn lane. The white SUV was not in the turn lane. It decided to turn anyway, smashed into the truck. Interesting here is that the 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗃𝗃, the construction company's name was on the side of their truck. The next day, they got a letter from a lawyer suing them, claiming that the truck driver was at fault. And they submitted this video, and the lawsuit was, dropped immediately. Also interesting is that they shared this company wide, and shared the video with folks so they understood, sort of why are we doing this? It's not the Big Brother approach. It's to actually help protect you. So I thought that was quite interesting as well. But and I like sharing this. It was a fairly recent happening, but probably most of you, if you're on social media, these videos of poor driving are pretty popular on the internet anyway, so they're all over the place. But this is one of the big reasons that insurance companies are pushing for these telematics is you avoid one catastrophic incident and everything's sort of paid for for a couple of years. I think important to pause high level. So we talked about a lot of different programs there combined. And I think it's important to talk about the big dollars here as you think about not just safety and catastrophic incidences, but all the operational risk of, even just owning too much equipment, for example, is a big issue inside of construction, and one that is one of the easier ones to solve with a smaller level of investment is sort of the good news we want to talk about here. And this is from FMI, which is where I used to work, consulting company. So some Mike Clancy and team there worked with Mike Vorster, who sort of wrote the book on construction equipment management. And so some numbers they put together, which talk about where construction companies are going with this. So lower CapEx investment was the first one I talk about. So the data they had is a typical $100 million company. That means a construction company like utility contractor that is doing $100 million in annual construction volume a year, $100 million. That company in the United States will typically own about $30 million worth of equipment. Usually their biggest and almost always one of their top two biggest capital investments. What we're finding is that most of these companies own too much equipment. Just as one quick, finger in the wind data point, and when they walk across their yard sort of proud of their stuff, that's actually not a great thing. We don't want to be like kids with a baseball card collection. We're learning to manage these assets more like a financial portfolio, right? And make sure that we're getting utilization up, and make sure something's working 45% of the time instead of 35% of the time. And what does that mean to the bottom line? And the numbers add up pretty quickly. So point being that with effective equipment management, that CapEx is pretty easy to drop down by $3, $4, $5 million. And so that becomes a pretty exciting conversation for a construction company. What would you do with $3 or $4 million of found capital to invest? And by the way, if you don't know it, if you're a member of NUCA, you probably know that you're a member of a high risk, lower margin industry. Utility contractors do a little bit better than, say, your average heavy civil on margins, but still even raises it from a 9% to a more like a 12% on a national average. So this capital expense can make a huge difference. And speaking of those margins, that same mid-sized heavy civil company will typically have about 20% budgeted for project costs for equipment. So you got labor, you got materials. About 20% is finger to the wind, and we're finding that you don't need to get those numbers down so huge. Actually, you get those down to 19 or 18%, which is very doable. And those numbers drop right down to the bottom line. So instead of being an 11% margin company, be a 13% margin company. So there are many areas where construction become more lean, if you will, and more profitable. But we're realizing that equipment, particularly for utility contractors, is a huge one. And so when you add safety and preventative maintenance and utilization and all these things together, the dollars add up very, very quickly. So that's a quick look at some of the tech, what's coming out, and what are some of the benefits that come out of fixing it. I did want to pause and say, this would almost be the, don't take my word for it. Most of you have access to really great, knowledgeable folks. Either, you might be a member of a captive, you might know the safety folks at NUCA. Data knowledge around this. So those are great folks to reach out to for that. And I would say that they're going to help. So some of these partnerships are enabling, and so we've partnered up with a bunch of the different insurance players, and there are policies now that delay supply chain disruption when they're paired with technology. So around inventory and theft prevention. This big second one here, reducing claims costs. So when you put this safety stuff in, a lot of insurance carriers are starting to require it to renew policies, and many of them are starting to measure that data and then either reduce or at least stop inflation on the are rising the cost of having insurance. So these are pretty big stuff, and then even streamline claim process. So having video evidence. I would say, obviously, the good news, you saw the Ferreira construction video that we shared, and that's a great example of, gosh, you weren't at fault and we proved it quickly instead of having to go back and forth and have high legal fees. But even when drivers are at fault, the data is getting pretty strong. That is great to know you're at fault and solve these things quickly. So the finger pointing and knowing, instead of having a delayed settlement, and save a little bit of money on lawyers to get back to work, so to speak. And a lot of the insurance companies are, and construction companies are benefiting from that. Quick look, this is not a complete list, but these are the ones I've run across. They're all around the risk area for construction. And what I mean here is focus matters. If you're a good utility contractor and know what you're doing, you know how to do something better than just an average contractor off the street. And when you get hired to do utility work, and what we're finding is that's true for really everything you work with. And there's really strong data around this, that tech that's purpose-built for construction, equipment that's built for construction, tools. And I'd say that it's also true for many of your partners. So if you work with an insurance provider that understands construction and project risks around construction and the unique risk and business of construction, they can be an amazing resource. And I'm not here to pitch one over the other, mostly just to say that insurance people are really good bean counters as well. So they can give you data that maybe is less biased. And those actually, in fact, I think I shared, I'm here in Lincoln, Nebraska, down the street from NUCA, Nebraska. I'm also down the street from the folks at Gene Lilly, Tom King. Those of you here local, he's one of those guys that's super knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. Let's see. So this is some data from USI, one of the leading brokers that we've sort of presented with and been on stage with. And more and more of you might be hearing this term nuclear verdict. These are the settlements are going up. And so these, what we call, the nuclear verdicts is the term that these insurance companies are calling $1 million verdicts. And this is when, you have a big truck potentially causing a huge accident. So these heavy vehicles. And so I guess I'd say there are tons of solutions out there for cars and F-150s. There's a whole bunch of telematics offerings, but where Tenna has been very focused to be very different is all of the equipment a utility contractor would use. And so these nuclear verdicts coming out of these big claims are the reason the insurance companies are pushing for it is because it's saving them millions and millions and millions of dollars. So we're a point being that just besides the number of accidents is we're seeing a big uptick in these nuclear verdicts that are more than $1 million. And so the emphasis on these fleet safety programs is now becoming best practice than even becoming associated with what the premium dollars you're going to be spending and are becoming required. So telematics and all these cameras are becoming required and necessary to help avoid these nuclear verdicts. And a lot of these companies have great data around this. So the formal strategy for driver assessment, hiring, training is becoming required. Those of you that do DOT work and things like that, we are seeing more DOTs require these kind of things. So and we're not expecting this to become less anytime soon. And then where were we? 2:33. I wanted to leave time for questions. Really wanted to pause and talk about some of the other wins you see from this tech. So we talked about all this different safety tech, but the real win we're also seeing is this single construction focused solution. And this is when you look at some of the best performing utility contractors, you can see case studies on them, and most of them are trying to actually invest in less tech. So when I was at FMI, for example, we did a wonderful survey of about 1,200 construction companies across North America and found some pretty compelling results on where they are and are not successful with tech. One obvious one was construction focus, right? We do tools, technology, partners. The more purpose-built it is for construction, we have higher results. For sure. That doesn't mean don't use Microsoft. We use Microsoft, right? But when you look at accounting platforms, project operations, equipment management, all those core features that construction companies are working with, versus 10 years ago, much more of them are construction focused, and we're seeing much better results. And then I'd also say single solutions that are well integrated. So we see a lot of companies where they maybe had 40 different technology solutions, all trying to tie them all together. And they're trying to get to a simple, 6, 7, 8 solutions that tie tightly together. Not, we want one accounting platform, not 3. We want one project operations platform, not 4. We want one document management solution, not 5. We want one equipment management solution, not 6. And that's kind of the direction this is going. So that single construction focused solution is a major differentiator as executives in the office bring all this together with true, trusted, autonomously collected data, but also because of that focus, because of I would say the big change is mobile phones, and that construction was a little bit shy around tech for a while, and that most people, if you wanted to operate an excavator, it probably meant you didn't want to sit in front of a laptop all day. But pretty much all of them now have a cell phone in their pocket. and anybody knew you're going to be hiring in their 20s and 30s, the data's in. They all would vastly do this on their phone before. This is how they do Venmo and they buy their movie tickets, right? It's how they expect to do work. And so everybody's sort of tying all that together. And the last thing we're finding that was interesting with some insurance companies is when you make this stuff easy to use and put it all on one platform, we get better compliance. I almost compare it to, if you have your kid and you told them you're going to put a tracker on them, tell them what, so where they are and what they're doing, they wouldn't like that. But if you give them an iPhone that has all these wonderful things on it that makes their life better, and it happens to tell you where they are, they tend to not complain. And so just kind of an interesting thing to think about there as we're investing in this safety tech, that a lot of it's both getting better, more accepted, and more based in these single construction focused platforms, which is yielding much better results. And then we already covered the insurance and DOT tech requirements that we're seeing more of these come in. And then lastly, I'd say we're seeing greatly increased field and office collaboration. We're seeing, less need for phone calls and leaving messages and waiting for responses, less unnecessary emails, and the collaboration is much higher value now. So the field and office are on the same set of trusted data. There's 1,000 stories here, but 10 years ago, you might write the equipment hours on a piece of paper and the superintendent would drive it into the office on their F-150, and then they would, type it into their accounting platform, right? And so there was a lot of time wasted there. And when you do that stuff autonomously and efficiently, the collaboration greatly increases when everybody's, on the same page. So wanted to talk about a few sort of at the end here, and then hopefully we'll leave a little bit of time for questions here. So yes, we're absolutely minimizing costly violations. This is the biggest reason most companies are excited about this, and why insurance companies and agencies are pushing for this stuff. And having these relevant insights, both yes, prove when you're not at fault, but the real the ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. It's not opinion anymore. The data is in. That's why these cameras are being more utilized, and that the small investment has big payoffs. That's why we're seeing more of them. Reduce insurance premiums with decreased liability. I think we covered that a little bit. But then really, I wanted to say what we're really finding is a differentiator, particularly. I would say, coming to your area soon is how I would put it, is, when I hang out with a lot of California contractors, we realize that they're kind of ahead of the rest of the country in terms of complexity, right? And sometimes the California contractors complain that wow, dealing with all this is hard, but it actually ends up being a massive differentiator. We're really the best folks win more work. It's hard to just be, two guys with a pickup truck and show up and win work. So some of these requirements are actually allowing the better players to win more work. And with the improved safety, they are not only taking home more margin at the end of the day because they are spending that 10 cents on the prevention instead of $1 on the cure, but also those safety ratings, EMR and all those as they go down, a lot of folks are able to bid on more work. If you need the safety rating in order to bid on work, there's stuff you can bid on that other people can't. So we're actually seeing more work won from this. And that's one thing we see a lot of construction companies not thinking about is they invest in this technology and get better at this. It's actually a differentiator where they can win more work. But and I'd even before I hang up the mic and we go to questions, I'd even add that some of the construction organizations like NUCA and AGC actually have some really cool data around this, even around people that as you look at folks in their 20s and 30s, more of them are willing to leave for better tech. That's interesting. I'm 57 and I can't imagine leaving my job because something was paper driven. But what is happening is if we want these younger generations coming into construction, and let's face it, labor is a big issue for many of us, that this tech is a huge differentiator and able to recruit new folks to the workforce. And so doing it well and making it so they don't have to do things 3 times, they only have to do them once. Or, put another way, they don't like coming to a company where they got to learn 12 different technologies to get their job done. They want to be, teach me the 1, 2, or 3 to get my job done, have them work well, have them be focused for my job. I don't want to see stuff for other people. I don't want to see alerts for other people. I want it to be specific to my job. And the results are in, those people are happy and they stay longer. So just another thing, more work one, more people, happier people. So a lot of ancillary benefits to getting this done as well. And there we are, 241. So I did, and listen, if I'm giving everybody, 10 or 15 minutes of life back, fantastic. But also, it sounded like maybe some questions were coming in. So wanted to leave time for that.
Thanks, Russ. Let's now open the webinar to questions. You can use the chat feature to submit a question, and I'll read the question to the presenter. Or if you prefer, unmute yourself, state your name and company, and ask the question directly. Remember to remute yourself after you finish. I've got one here. Does Tenna integrate with other construction tech we use, like pulling data into our accounting system?
Oh, love that. Well, yes. Very important feature for construction focused tech is that they push the data wherever the heck you want it. So yeah, accounting systems, or ERP as some people call them, Tenna has pre-built integrations into Vista and Spectrum, which are owned by Viewpoint, owned by Trimble, with Sage 300, Sage 100, with Coins, with Foundation, a lot of them. And those are sort of pre-built integrations. And then for some of the sort of native cloud-based ones, we're utilizing Open API to move the data back and forth, which gives you a little bit more flexibility, a little more setup work on the front end, but it works extremely well. And that's what companies like 𝗪𝗂𝘂𝗪𝗂𝗃, which we're seeing more and more business, and we're seeing more folks sort of move to the cloud. And then Sage's newish offering called Intact, for example. But yes, in fact, if I could, I'd add that we also integrate into most of the popular project operations platforms, like the Procores and the Riskcasts of the world. And then finally, I'd say that we even have integrations for other equipment focused stuff. So for instance, the folks that are utilizing Tenna and have all their equipment in there, you can do one-touch disposal to use like Boom and Bucket and auction stuff off. So saving a ton of time there and getting better prices. And then I also say on the front end, we can even integrate other telematics, much like, if Tenna is the iPhone and you can hop in and make that, work with your Ford, same thing. If you already have telematics from John Deere or Caterpillar or Volvo or the like, and or crane companies that are building out to the specification, or even rental shops like Sunbelt or United Rentals, we can integrate that data into Tenna as well. A great question. Thanks.
Here's another question. How do you deter theft of dash cameras?
Oh, yep. At Tenna, we've solved that by having a separate telematics device that's in there. So we have actually had some trucks stolen where they ripped the camera out and thought they were good, but they're not. We can still recover it. That's actually a pretty big difference there. So glad that question was asked. That sometimes thieves will take it and think that they've covered themselves by ripping out and checking out a window, but no, we can still recover those.
Are there other questions? Here's one. How do you handle bad drivers? Any recommendations on coaching and changing behavior?
Yeah. I would start with, I'm glad that, the question used the word coaching, that we want these systems to be helping everybody get better together. And so and we've seen enough companies roll this out now that it's not really about using the stick or having people be in trouble. It's really about everybody getting better together. So the driver scorecard is a great tool for that. It's there are instant alerts to keep people safe, but really when it comes to coaching, it's more about like if we see really bad behavior over the course of many months, that's what you want to correct and you want to do coaching. And at the company's discretion, if somebody is just belligerent and speeding all the time, you will pick up on that and trend and you can do more corrective action. But it's a 98% coaching. We're all on the same team play here. think of it. I mean, I think construction's really good at tool talks and safety talks at the beginning of a day, and sometimes the way we treat driver scorecard and driver behavior falls right into that same kind of process.
Thanks, Russ. Are there other questions? We have one last one. Our operators pushed back on cameras. They said it was Big Brother. How do you handle that?
Yeah, the best way is, well, the 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗂𝗀 construction story I shared is probably the best single example I've seen. They had some pushback. They had some people complaining about it. But that video I shared earlier in the presentation, where the driver was exonerated and exonerated quickly, one thing they did that I would recommend is not only did they use that and send it to their insurance folks and their lawyer and got this thing dismissed very quickly, they also took it and shared it company-wide and said, guys, here's what happened. Here's why we put the cameras in. Here's a great example. And it sort of overnight made everybody realize, oh, wait a minute, like, they are doing this to help us. No one's, the theory that, oh, someone's, secretly sitting in a room and, watching what I'm doing, really most construction companies I talk to are looking for more labor and not trying to find more to do with their empty hours. Most of them are too busy, is the real problem. So being more efficient is what most folks are trying to do. And sorry, that was a little bit long-winded, but my point is, once you have one of these exoneration, share it out. Yeah, and then I would also say that Tenna, we're very white glove, so we will come out and help install this stuff and help with the education process and have a lot of great stuff to share there. We'll actually share the videos up front and share some stories from other construction companies to help do that. And I would say that I'll give some bad examples as well. I've seen some companies buy this stuff and not tell their field it was showing up. That has the opposite intended. If they don't know this is coming, if they're not part of this, I would say a lot of this is with good planning. Just like any good build project, good design leads to good build. Is talk to your folks about what they're looking to solve, right? Ask those questions. You actually usually get this stuff back that, usually there's folks that are sick of getting blamed for stuff, is one of the answers you'll see. So when you invest in this, you can now bring these cameras and other devices out saying, hey, we heard you. We're not just buying this for us. We heard you, what you're asking for, and we're investing this because it solves this, and not just for the company, but what's specifically for you for the different roles, whether it's an operator or a mechanic or an equipment manager, what is in it for them specifically in the role. And if you take a little bit of time, there's an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure on that as well. So I would say the how to have these fail is to just buy a box of these with a set of instructions to install them and just start installing them out in the trucks. You will see bad results. You will see pushback. And so that's one thing we pride ourselves on helping with.
Russ, thanks very much for your time today to present this information to our webinar guests. The support of our national partners are invaluable in helping us present interesting content to our members to help their construction businesses succeed. And thank you for your time today to join us for this special industry webinar and for supporting NUCA. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and please enjoy the rest of your week.